Tracy Stubblefield. I'm one of the Outreach and Communications Coordinators here at the Center for Agroforestry. Thanks for coming today. Have you guys been enjoying the roast so far?
Perfect.
Yeah, great. I feel like we've seen a turnout this year like I've not seen before. Beautiful weather, I guess, just really encourages people to get out here, so that's really exciting. Okay, so chestnut parsnip hummus. Did anybody get to try this today? It was at the sampling table, but it usually goes pretty fast. I'm just curious. Okay. All right. Well, we'll have plenty left over, so if you guys want to sample afterward, more than welcome. We should have, with this crowd here, we should have plenty for everybody. Okay, so before we start pureeing and all of this, the first thing is softening the chestnuts and the parsnips. So, chestnuts, does anyone know what we have to do before we start cooking chestnuts in any capacity? It's really important, you have to score them. If you don't score them, they will explode. So, yeah, that's very important. So, scoring, if you look up how to score chestnuts, you're gonna see a few different methods. One that we've seen is the X method, where you sort of like cut an X across the top. You can do that, you know, no shame on that method, but so when it opens up, so the idea is you want to put a slice in the top for the chestnut to open up as it heats up, for the shell to open so that you can access the meat. I find that when you cut an X, it kind of opens like a flower, and it can kind of make, it might not open all the way, and you'll have to deal with those kind of like shards that the little triangles in the X make. So the way that we prefer to do it at the center is, you sort of think like if you were gonna draw a sun like on the horizon, the sort of like half circle. So you just take your knife and you go around the top of the chestnut, leaving a little bit at the bottom here. And that'll sort of open up like a clamshell. And I feel that that's personally just a lot easier way to access the meat. The other way, you can just take the knife, just cut straight through it. If you don't wanna, sometimes with scoring, you kind of have to like poke it, drag it around, you know. You don't need a special scoring knife to do that, but you might like slip, you know. So you can just like sort of make a little cut and then just cut all the way through, still leaving that little bit at the bottom so you get that sub-hoagie sandwich clamshell effect. And so then in order to get the shell to pop off from the meat, you are going to essentially do like, you can do a double broiler or like a steamer basket is what works the best. So just a few inches of water in a pot and then a steamer basket over top, cover it. 5 or so minutes. Chestnuts can be picky, you know, not all of them are gonna pop at the same time, you know. And so then once they start to open up, or you can start seeing like a little sliver of that like yellow flesh on the inside after a few minutes. So this is number 3, remove a few chestnuts at a time. I learned the hard way that is very important, because you see, oh, you know, they're ready, and you just kind of want to dump them all out and then start taking the shells off. So there's the initial shell. There's also this thin brown skin layer underneath that shell that wants to adhere to that flesh. So the steamier it is, the easier that skin peels off. You know, it just kind of releases from that internal flesh. As it gets cooler, it starts to want to stick and shrink back onto that yellow flesh. So you're sitting there and you're like peeling off like tiny little bits of that internal skin, and it's just, so yeah, I would suggest taking just like a spoon and scooping out a few at a time to keep them nice and warm sort of in that steam. Just like set your heater down on simmer. So once you have everything removed, so your chestnuts aren't fully cooked at this point, you've just sort of removed the shells. So this is when we're gonna get into the actual recipe part for the chestnut hummus. Your parsnips and your chestnuts, it would be swell if they softened at the same rate, but they don't. So in order to prevent the parsnips from getting super mushy while your chestnuts are still not entirely there, I would suggest separating them into two small, or like 2 medium-sized saucepans, pots, whatever have you, and then bringing those to boil, and then just sort of like how you would check for the doneness of a potato with the parsnips, just seeing if the fork goes in, you know, scoop one out, seeing if the fork goes in. The chestnuts will actually, not necessarily like a potato won't slide in, they'll kind of start to shatter a little bit, like break apart, and that's when you know they're done. Chestnuts take about 20 or so minutes to soften. Parsnips are a little less, probably like 12 to 15. So once you have those boiled and drained, you're gonna reserve 1 tablespoon of that like starchy liquid from either the chestnut or the parsnip or pot, or you mix it together. Sort of the same idea of when you reserve cooking water from pasta. If you ever do that, it sort of helps the starches in that water sort of help all the seasonings and stuff adhere together. So you're gonna reserve some of that liquid, and then you're just gonna, classic hummus, just start dumping things in the food processor, which is what we're gonna do today. So I know maybe it's not the funnest, but I'm not gonna make you sit here and watch me boil water for 20 minutes. So I went ahead and I already pre-boiled these last night. So normally this is much warmer of a process, right? These are probably gonna be still pretty warm whenever they're drained and sitting there and you put them in. So this is gonna be a little bit of an experiment. I've never blended them cool before, so we'll see how it turns out. I think my number one fear is that like the butter might not work as well with the cooler, but I'm melting the butter here, so that should help in this process. So we're just gonna start putting in our chestnuts, our parsnips here, and starting to puree with all of our ingredients. And I went ahead and Rachel rate it and just like pre-portioned everything out as well. Yeah, I'm curious, while I'm dumping this in, have any of you cooked with chestnuts before? What have you made with chestnuts?
Mostly I just eat them roasted. And then sometimes I take them and chop them up and put them like in an apple galette.
In like a galette?
In a galette, yeah, which is like a rustic pie.
Yeah, it's kind of like a Dutch baby. Have you ever heard of it?
No, but I think that's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're so versatile.
They really are. They are right on that line between sweet and savory. They can just swing to either side really well. Mike is our associate director at the Center for Agroforestry. This is his recipe that he's made for the roast for, oh gosh, several years now. And so he always makes a double batch and brings it and has it at the sampling table. Well, he moved to Rhode Island and is semi-retired now, but we didn't want that tradition to die. So I was like, not the hummus, I'll do it. I'll take the hummus over. I will say, I personally, I like the parsnips as opposed to a chickpea. I kind of think the chestnuts already serve that sort of chickpea role in the hummus. And I like chickpea hummus, but I do think it has a little bit more grit and a little bit more of like that gritty feeling in the aftertaste. This is a really smooth hummus. I really like the consistency, and I think a lot of that is owed to the parsnips. Yeah.
And you're using butter, but you could just use all olive oil, right?
Yeah, you could substitute for all olive oil if that's preferred. Yeah, so like I said, the hard part is mostly done. Just dumping everything in now.
Are you putting garlic in to cook them?
That is, yeah, that's garlic here. And then we've got, man, if you ever want to feel a little bit silly, just reserve a tablespoon of cooking liquid and then transport that like 25 miles in a cooler. It's fine. It's important. I'm glad we have it. But juice. Oh, I did bring a lemon because I wanted to. So I personally think that the lemon in this, obviously, you know, there's those lovely, very convenient like lemon juice jugs that you can buy in the store. but I really think the addition of fresh lemon, it really comes through a lot stronger for me personally whenever you use fresh lemons. So I learned this trick whenever we were making lemonade a few years back. My mother-in-law taught me this. If you like sort of roll the lemon before you cut it and juice it, that sort of softens up those fibers in there and makes it a little less like intense on your forearm when you cut it in half and then like go to juice it with this guy. So yeah, just giving it like a nice little roll there, cut it in half, juice it, pick the seeds out. All right, so we'll get our lemon juice in there. All right. The ingredients I haven't pre-portioned out yet are tahini. So you know how there are those ingredients that as you're cooking, you're like, I'm gonna take a bite of that. That's, yeah, like, yeah, that's a nice little treat as I'm cooking. Tahini is not that. Tahini is wonderful and a very important spice in any hummus you're gonna make, but it is not a snack. It's not a snacking while you're, yeah, just a forewarning if you're a person like me who's like, oh, I'm gonna try a bite of that. Okay, so there is 2 tablespoons of tahini going in here. Be generous with it. This lets you know how much hummus I've made in the past week. I just bought this tahini and it's already down to here. Because I had to do the trial run and make sure that it like, okay, does this taste good for the roast? Do I need to make any changes? And so I brought that and then I had to make the double batch for the roast and I had to make this one. So much. I'm gonna see hummus in my sleep tonight. Okay, and then cumin is our spice. The spice you'll primarily taste in a lot of hummuses. We're gonna do 2 teaspoons. 2 teaspoons of this. Great. All right, and I think our butter is probably cooled enough to add. We can go ahead and add that olive oil first though. I brought my liquid measuring cup for the olive oil and then realized it doesn't go down to a 1/4 cup. It starts in a 1/2 cup. So we're gonna like make my high school cooking teacher cringe and use a dry measuring cup for a liquid substance. So we've got a 1/4 cup of olive oil going in here now. Yeah, I think one of the great things about cooking, especially with recipes like hummus, is if you want to sub out the butter for olive oil, you know, if you want to make those shifts, if you want to try to see what it tastes like with chickpeas as opposed to parsnips, you know, great time for experimenting. It's not like baking where if you experiment, it's just not going to come out. Baking is a science, but I think cooking, especially with dips like hummus, is more of an art. You can add a little bit more of your own personal flair to it. Okay, so I think we're gonna add our butter here, which did get a little brown, but I'm actually kind of happy about that. It's a nuttier flavor. We'll just add nut flavor on top of nut flavor into the chestnut hummus here. Okay, so yeah, I think we've got everything in there. Our chestnut meats, parsnips, 1 clove of garlic, a 1/4 cup of fresh lemon juice, our melted butter, olive oil, cumin, tahini. Salt and pepper we'll add afterward, after it's blended for a little bit. Okay, so now comes the awkward, a little bit dead air part because this has to blend for 3 solid minutes. So let's make sure we are hot with power. Okay, great. And then I'm going to go. Great, 3 minutes. 3 minutes on the clock here. We're about 2 minutes and 30 seconds. I'm just gonna, you can see some of the stuff like stayed here to the side. I'm just gonna scrape that down and let it go for a little bit longer.
There's a lot of cheese. Yeah. There's a lot of cheese, but it's also a lot of fence. It's a lot of fence, yeah. So we can set something up for free plantains.
Okay. That's looking pretty good. At this point, I would just pop a little bit of salt and pepper in there, again, to taste. I probably won't add as much today, like I said, just because I personally prefer a little bit more of the sweetness to come through. So we'll sprinkle a little bit. This is kosher salt on here. Then I'll do some freshly ground black pepper. Then I'll grind that for a little bit, and then while that's going through sort of its last blend, I'm gonna do some fresh parsley for the top, which is really nice. Okay. Yeah, I'm gonna have a lot of this, so please feel free. I'll have crackers and cups up here. Yeah, take as much as you want. Okay. Pop this on for one last blend through. One of my favorite things on cooking shows is whenever something doesn't come out the way, like a little chunky, they're like, oh, it's rustic. Yeah. Oh, we're gonna have some rustic parsley. Okay, so once this is done, we're gonna pull this off and just transfer it to the bowl. Normally it would say, wait until it's room temperature. It's room temperature now since everything was cooled. I'm gonna go ahead and say the butter and the cool ingredients, they just evened out. It's room temperature now. And then we'll just scoop this out into a bowl, garnish, and paper cups, gluten-free crackers, please, because like I said, I've made so much hummus this week. You guys can take as much as you would like. If you're wanting to add any more salt or pepper, feel free. Just pop this guy in here. It's very smooth. Like I said, I'm a big fan of regular chickpea hummus, but the first time I ate this, I was like, the consistency is so nice. It kind of makes you not want to go back to chickpea hummus, but if only chestnuts were year-round. Not quite, but nice seasonal thing to look forward to, I think.